So just to introduce myself, my name's Sean. So I am the commercial manager at Mimecast. I'm based in Dubai, originally from South Africa. And what I want to take you through in this session is basically an introduction to something we call Security 3.0. Now, what this is, it's essentially just a bundle of solutions that are specifically designed to combat challenges that many organizations face today. Now, since coming to the UAE about probably 4.5 years ago, I've dealt with 500-600 organizations across the Middle East. And what's amazing to see when looking back is how the security problem has evolved and how quickly it's evolved. Now, the requirements don't change. They just become a lot more complex, and they require a lot more of a inclusive solution. So to give you some examples, last week I had a meeting with a big retail company. They've got a very large online presence, and they were facing challenges with brand impersonation attacks. Now, specifically taking advantage of the COVID messaging that they sent out to their customers, right? The same day, I had a meeting with a construction company. Now, they were facing challenges protecting their suppliers from emails that looked like they were coming from them, but these had fake invoices and payment information related to discounts for early payments, right? So, we've seen that these attacks are becoming a lot more complex, but one thing remains quite static, and that's that nearly all cyber attacks leverage email. So just to name some reasons why, email is always on. It's our primary form of communication. It's 24/7. We all communicate via email. It is also the trusted form of communication. So, we've got obviously, no matter where you are, where you are around the world, or even if you're sitting in the office, everybody communicates over email. It can also carry links and attachments. It can be impersonated. So this is one of the main reasons why attackers leverage email, because it's very easy for them to deliver their payloads effectively. It's very quick. So, multi-million-dollar infrastructure today is very difficult and time-consuming for attackers to try and compromise. Why spend all that time and all that effort when all I need to do is put together an email and deliver it? And also, it's very cheap, right? Now, this makes email a very effective tool for bad actors. And what some of the intentions are behind these attacks would be to either gain control over IT assets, or gain access to and steal data or money, which is probably 90% of the intention behind the attacks. Disrupt business operations. We've seen that with ransomware or denial of service attacks. Every year, the world is seeing an increase in various types of cyber attacks. Now, the top right, you'll see 94% of the organizations, they admitted to experiencing a phishing attack. In the middle top, you see 61%. Now, 61% of the organizations that believe suffering a negative business impact from an email-borne attack is either likely or it's inevitable. I always like to joke that I think the other, the other third are just in denial. If you go through any of your personal or corporate email, there's for sure there is some sort of attack that's lurking there. Now, Mimecast alone blocks on average around 22 billion threats monthly. So that's around 40,000 customers across the globe. Every quarter, we are releasing something called a State of Email Security Report. It's a quarterly report around global threat intelligence. So this is something that you can navigate to our website and download. But in this piece, we focus on 4 different attack vectors. So bottom left to right, you can see spam, impersonation attacks, opportunistic attacks, and targeted attacks. In the graphs, you can see that there is a trend. There's some small peaks and valleys. However, it is quite constant. Now, maybe with the exception, if you look at December 2019. So this is a little bit of an older report. I just use this as an example. We'll speak about shortly around COVID. But you can see that there's a big drop off in December. Now, there are a few reasons for that. One is because a lot of businesses close during that period, so activity drops. But Attackers are people, right? They're not machines that are just conducting attacks. They are people that are sitting behind machines. And believe it or not, they've got their holiday periods as well, just like any other business. Now, if we, again, when we look at this graph, so keeping in mind that attackers do have their peak times, the COVID pandemic is a perfect example. So with all the news and the links and the apps that are floating around, it's really easy for somebody to be tricked into clicking on something that's not legitimate. If we look in October, you can see that there's some with very high peaks. So in a single day in October, Mimecast alone reported a peak volume of around 5.1 million combined threats. Now, if you divide that by the customer base, it's around 140 attacks per customer on a single day. I'm not quite sure what happened on their day and why, but just give you an idea that these things can get out of control. Historically, things used to be a lot easier. So email security has typically been provided by a SEG or secure email gateway. This is your classic email perimeter strategy to keep bad emails from making their way to good organizations. Now, the perimeter is slowly dissolving. So this is due to the changes in the threat landscape and the way that we work. And this all requires that the strategy needs to extend beyond your traditional layer into something that's more pervasive and more complementary of your overall security systems and work environment. So we've obviously got people that are now working remotely and working from home, places referring to, you don't have to be in the network anymore. You can be anywhere around the world. And all these various devices that we do have at our disposal today. So just want to skip some of this, some of these little fade-ins and fade-outs. But I just want to talk about the correlation between, success and targeting. I'm just going to pick on Microsoft a bit because they are the biggest target in terms of these cyber attacks. Now, there are a few reasons why. So we see the attack surf increasing because Microsoft are an absolute juggernaut. They have around 300 million business users, and this is increasing every single day. Now, what this means is that every user is a new angle of attack for malicious actors. And every user added means that the data that's added to 365 increases. And by increasing that, you increase in the cash prize for cracking 365 protection. Now, COVID-19 has also had a remarkable catalyst for Microsoft adoption, and just Teams as an example. We saw an increase. They saw an increase rather of around 40% month over month, right? Significant. I mean, we saw that with Zoom and all these other messaging platforms. So the problem that we're facing today, or we might refer it as to a new age problem, requires that we need a comprehensive security strategy, and this means not just relying on the perimeter, but we also need something that's more pervasive and has security measures that we can analyze and look into 3 different zones. Now, Zone 1, we refer to as at your perimeter. So in Mimecast terms, this is effectively where your MX records are going to be pointing. Zone 2 then refers to inside your network and your organization. So this is stuff that's now happening internally, whether it's the users or it's the lateral spread of emails. And then Zone 3 is then beyond your perimeter. So this is now happening externally, so outside of your vision. So when we look at some of these zones, and we look at some of the ways that these zones are vulnerable, Zone 1 is typically vulnerable to things like spam and targeted attacks. 94% of all attacks start with email. These emails might be something as innocent as spam or something more nefarious, such as a phishing, spear phishing, or an impersonation attack. Zone 2 is more related to things like human error, right? So it doesn't matter how much technology we have in place, our humans are always the weakest link. And your security chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So it's about educating the end user and eliminating any human error. We also look at the internal compromise of those employees and then the lateral spread of those attacks within the same domain. When we refer to beyond your perimeter, we're looking at brand abuse, so brand exploits where websites are being scraped and cloned, or your good name is being used externally to your customers and your suppliers, and then also domain spoofing where they use the exact characters in those domains. Okay, so to dig a little bit deeper, when we look at your perimeter, now in Mimecast, I mentioned we define this as zone 1. In other words, this is your secure email gateway. So if we look at this in a physical world, it's like passport control at the airport. So you get in, you want to go traveling, you get into a plane, you land up in another country. The first thing that happens is that you go through passport control. Passport control will analyze and allow you in or deport you. Same thing with from an email perspective, the gateway will only allow good things by eliminating all the bad stuff before it hits your environment. Another example would be something like your reception. People arrive at the reception. Reception's job is to figure out who they're coming to meet. Do they have an appointment? Are they allowed into the building? Now, attacks on zone 1 are relentless. More than 94% of all attacks start with email. Now, the good news is that maybe some of you on the call are aware is that we do provide some of the best technology in the industry with the highest levels of efficacy. Efficacy is very important because that's a direct translation into security. The higher the efficacy, the better the security. Now, we go to market with a suite called Targeted Threat Protection, and this is effectively in place to stop bad emails from making their way to good organizations. Without going into detail on this, this is basically the targeted threat inspection funnel. I just want to highlight this because every little piece in this funnel represents a different check that happens. Okay, so any good security solution or any good vendor that's worth its weight is going to have multiple engines doing multiple checks happening simultaneously as quickly as possible in real time. Right now, every layer here is a different check that does a different thing. Okay, so multi-layered, 100% software as a solution, nothing to manage on-prem or to maintain. Constantly updated, very levels of high efficacy. So when we move to zone 2, so we're moving away from the perimeter to inside the perimeter or inside the network. Now, even with a robust email security strategy in place, attackers can still try and bypass the perimeter and operate inside the email network. Now, this is where we find things like compromised employee accounts. We might find malicious employees, who are just sending things because they don't like where they work. They don't care for the well-being, and they just want to see the world burn, right? Or we've got careless users. So these are users that might not be aware of what they send in internally. In a lot of cases, they use the organization's email systems to send bad stuff internally and out. Now, there are two very important considerations in zone 2. The first is having the ability to interrogate internally sent emails, but also to have the capability to immediately remove malicious threats via threat hunting, right? The second is since your employees are vulnerable to open up an attachment, clicking on links, falling for scams, the second important consideration is awareness training. Now, this is really critical to help turn your employees into allies rather than the weakest links. So from threat hunting inside the network, when we look at this and when our customers are adopting this product, effectively what they're looking for is, do we have visibility and can we monitor what is being sent internally? Not just whether it is malicious today, but a link that might be compromised in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months time. Do we have visibility on that? Are we constantly scanning that? Are we providing threat intelligence around that? And then more importantly, do we have the ability to remediate, right? Using automatic remediation to find, to remove threats from users' mailboxes. These could be existing or new threats, or to manually remove stuff that might be against company policy, as an example. The awareness training, it's important to adopt a product that's going to not only educate the users, but it's also going to give you an idea in terms of the risk score within your environment that can be broken down per user, per department, per group, or for the entire organization, right? Something that's going to allow you to send videos, questions, whether it is, sorry, the word has now slipped my mind, but custom generated modules, so you can understand, are my users understanding what's going on in the organization? Is sentiment increasing, meaning that are they feeling better about their security and how it's affecting organizations and them in their personal lives? Whether from a risk score perspective, are things getting better or worse, right? With obviously performance stats across multiple different modules. The awareness training, again, that we provide is flooded with amazing content. So really, very professional videos with professional actors. We use humor to really keep employees engaged. The videos are typically up to around 2 minutes in length, so it's short. It's very catchy. And you can see we also cover multiple different modules. You have micro quizzes to test users, specially designed questions, so they're not obviously incorrect. So users really have to engage and understand in terms of what's happening. And other benefits as well, such as gamification, phishing simulation, and so on. As I mentioned, the idea behind the awareness training is to identify who your high-risk employees are, so you can roll out campaigns, understand, sentiment decreasing, is engagement decreasing, is knowledge decreasing, or is it happening in the other direction? Once you can understand the risk, you can start plugging the holes. You can start reducing the risk of users clicking on malicious links, opening up attachments, and so on, because they now understand what to look for and how it affects them and how it affects the companies. So now we move from zone 1 and zone 2 to beyond your perimeter, which we call zone 3. Now, unfortunately, it's still very simple for attackers to easily impersonate a brand on the internet. They don't even have to try and penetrate the perimeter. So without even accessing the internal network or anything, newbie attackers, anybody, you can actually Google it, go into YouTube. There are videos on how to register a similar domain or host a website or login page, and effectively use that to draw customers, partners, or the general public to it. Now, we know that this could cause all sorts of reputational damage. Sometimes we don't actually realize how we can quantify this, but it can lead to direct and indirect financial losses. And all the value and trust that a brand may have taken years to build could be destroyed within seconds. Now, there is light at the end of the tunnel. However, this would require correctly implementing something like DMARC, right? And this is designed to protect the domains that your organization owns. And we combine this with proactive hunting for and takedowns of impersonated domains that you don't own. Now, this is two sides to the same coin. These are attacks that are happening externally. You don't have visibility on it, right? But correctly configuring DMARC to protect the domains you own, coupled with proactive hunting for and takedowns of legitimate email is getting delivered, while obviously spoofing is getting rejected with threat intelligence behind it, and then also the brand impersonation attacks to look at similar domains that are popping up that look similar to yours. So now, enforcing DMARC can really be a lengthy process. So if you have a lot of sending domains or a lot of applications that send on your behalf, the risk of configuring DMARC without having the visibility is rejecting legitimate email. Now, we recently conducted sample research in the UAE, and what it showed us is that 75% of companies actually don't have a DMARC policy. Now, of the 25% that do, 60% are only monitoring. Now, I'm going to show you very shortly what these policies look like if you've never dealt with DMARC before. But to give you an idea, most companies that are just monitoring are presented with reports that look like this. Okay, so these are XML reports. People don't read them. This is completely gibberish, right? Now, what a product like DMARC Analyzer will do, it's an easy to set up and use platform. Now, it offers alerts, it offers reporting. You have 360-degree visibility, and you can see and monitor for unauthorized use of the domains that you own, right? Those ones that are specifically being used to target your customers, your suppliers, and your employees. Now, we obviously at Mimecast, we aim to make DMARC conformance as simple as possible by providing a dashboard that will translate these types of reports into a more sort of intuitive and readable format. Now, the idea is that you want to get your DMARC to a reject or monitor state as quickly as possible. Now, there are 3 policies, and this should be taken as a journey. Now, your first policy, if you've already begun your journey, you're probably on a none policy, which means that if you don't have a product like DMARC Analyzer, you're saying, I want to get the reports, and then I'll analyze the reports. Once I understand the domains that are legitimately sent on your behalf, those applications and systems, then I can start moving to a quarantine and to eventually a reject. The risk of moving straight to reject, if you don't fully understand your environment, you don't have the correct DMARC compliance, maybe there's something wrong with the DKIM verification or SPF, you could start having legitimate traffic rejected. Okay, so defeating the purpose, really. So as I mentioned, it's the DMARC Analyzer product. It's really easy to implement. The product's there to help you implement DMARC. It has an integrated project management tool that has a setup wizard with knowledge-based articles if you want to understand a lot more around why DMARC, what DMARC does, what is SPF, what's DKIM, why is this all important. But it is one of these basic security practices that should be put in place to avoid letting attackers spoof your domain and use that in the wild. Okay. It's also set up not only just to give you visibility in terms of the SPF and the DKIM for each domain, but it's also configured to collect all the aggregated and the forensic reports. So you can start really getting more intelligence in terms of what are these reports telling me? Are they telling me that somebody spoofed me from a specific location, where they send in those emails, who the recipients are that are receiving but rejecting that traffic, so give you a lot more intelligence in terms of what's happening. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to take us through is what it looks like if an attacker cannot spoof your domain, but they decide to register a domain that looks similar to yours, and effectively how these attacks work. Now, what the attacker will do is they're going to register a fake web address. You can see in this particular example, it's not Mimecast, right? It's login-mimecast.com. Now, as just a typical user, especially, I mean, if you're using your mobile phone or something like that, you don't really check these things, right? Now, what the attacker will do is they'll register this. They will then probably go to the website. They might start taking things like the logos. They might scrape the website. They'll definitely take one of the login pages so they can start harvesting credentials, and then they'll create a page that will have all this information. Now, this is fairly easy. You can see this is really just cut and paste, but if the website has been scraped and cloned, you wouldn't actually be able to tell the difference other than where the initial link, login.mimecast.com, is obviously not Mimecast. What they then do is typically to be able to lure people there, they will then compose an email. You can see that this particular email, I used the example of COVID-19 earlier, but they'll always use some sort of compelling event to draw people to click on it without even reading. So sometimes with an impersonation attack, you might find at the bottom, there'll be urgency, something like, you should have done this yesterday. Or if it's coming from a CFO and says, you better do this now, right? This is creating some sort of urgency in it where the user is less likely to check certain indicators in this email. In this case, it's specifically saying, look, there's from COVID-19 phishing scams, we need to ensure that the account is correctly configured. So use this link to change your password. User's going to click in the link. They're going to go to that login.mimecast page, and they're going to get compromised. Now, we see these types of attacks all the time. These are just some of the examples, but again, you can look through any of your corporate or your private emails. You'll see some stuff there, probably from FedEx and Amazon, PayPal, Facebook. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Now, these attacks might not be easy to spot. They could look very, very legitimate. And obviously, the more effort that the attacker is going to put into it, the more legitimate these attacks are going to look at the end of the day. So the brand exploit protect really focuses on early proactive detection of these types of things. Now, it's specifically designed to find and stop phishing attacks right as they are born. The solution is effectively made up of three core elements. The first is proactive intelligence. So we have quadrillions of scans. It's probably one of the first times you've heard that word, but quadrillions of scans. And this is happening 24/7 using AI and using machine learning to rapidly identify the use of these lookalike domains. And these ones are obviously being rendered and designed to deceive and steal data or money. The second is the threat detection agent. So this is where we uncover instances where the website has been scraped and cloned and hosted on another domain. And the third is the remediation, to ensure that we can take effective and immediate action to stop these attacks and minimize any of the damage. So you can see that from this dashboard, it's from a monitoring perspective, it will populate domains that look similar to yours that are being registered. We've got APIs into thousands of registrars globally. So as soon as a new domain has been registered, this will populate, and then it gets categorized. Either it is suspicious, so we need you to have a look at it. It might be something that could be a live attack, in which case we know that it's being used. They've scraped your website, whatever the case is. And then the action to request a takedown is actioned from the customer side, where the request is then sent to the Mimecast SOC team, who have already collected all the forensic information that can then be worked with the registrar to have that website or that domain removed. Now, apart from the three different zones that we mentioned, we also offer bilateral API integrations. So this screenshot is just some of them. We have hundreds, and we continuously add in more and more SIMs, SOARs, endpoints, XDRs, EDRs, firewalls, and all of that. And the reason is because the email attack surface is so rich in data and intelligence. And if we can share that data via dashboards and APIs, we can effectively help IT teams and technology systems become a lot smarter. Now, the email security estate basically is the highest contributing component in any customer's environment, any of their ecosystems. And it's also the biggest pervasive value add. So not just across the three zones, but we're talking across the entire security estate. This is a framework. This is basically a combination of all the products and services that we offer. right? I won't go through this now. We focused on the left side, the zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. We haven't focused on any of the resilience extensions, but if you want to just take a screenshot of this, or I can share it with you over the call. If anything else is of interest here, we can talk about it on a separate session. So why Mimecast and why now? So IT and security teams at most companies are overwhelmed and under-resourced. It doesn't matter who I speak to, the IT teams are never big enough. There's always too much to manage. Your hours always extend way beyond close of business. Now, Mimecast is addressing the email security challenge of today at industry scale with this Security 3.0. Now, we're also using the core platform to help customers achieve greater security and resilience, but to further reduce the cost and complexity of their environment. We build in this technology with an intentional and scalable design ideology. So what I mean by that is that we have a roadmap that extends within the next couple of months, 5 years, 10 years. Now, if we look at what Apple did when they created the iPhone, the idea was to bring together several popular but disparate technologies into one powerful and easy to use platform. Mimecast is obviously trying to do the same by integrating all the solutions into one AdCon, something that gives you better security but with less to manage, or more features and functionality but with less to manage. Now, we've wrapped our platform around connectors and APIs, so we can keep building and keep extending the scope of the capabilities that we offer to our customers. Now, if we look at something like our web security, here is a perfect example of where we offer more protection but less to manage, because we've already taken the protection we have already provided around the URLs, but now we're extending this to a DNS gateway. Or we talk about the awareness training. So here we look to strengthen the human firewall, or the threat intelligence, which is there to provide insight into how an organization is being targeted, and also what actions that organization can take to ensure that their protections are optimized. So this particular slide, I took this at the beginning of the pandemic last year, and was it last year? I can't even remember how long we've been in the pandemic for. But this particular slide talks about three things, three challenges: smaller budgets, leaner teams, and greater risks. Now, this is something from day one for the past 20 years that Mimecast has been focused on helping reduce this. So, by providing a SaaS platform that's got a predictable cost, we can consolidate the vendor cost. We can address the small budget problem. Now, we've also seen during the pandemic is when it really became apparent that budgets were getting slashed, and the first thing to go most of the time is, okay, what can we cut out of IT's budget, which is a tiny sliver of the pie anyway. We then look at things like leaner teams. I addressed this a little bit earlier, but we've got a lot more to manage. There's a lot of applications and systems, but the IT teams aren't really getting bigger, so we've just got to become a lot smarter and a lot more proficient around what we do. We obviously address this by having been able to integrate with parts of your network, ultimately making Mimecast the center of the world from a security perspective. Having everything integrated into a single admin console, making education and accessible expertise and the integrations which I spoke of, and then reducing greater risk. Providing high levels of efficacy, great levels of security to be able to reduce the risk across the three different zones and more. And we will continue to incrementally build capabilities to integrate and connect with other security investments, and keep making things easier, more cost-effective for our customers around the world. Okay, and with that, that's about 40 minutes. That brings us to the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out to us. More than happy to have one-on-one sessions with anything else that you'd like us to dig a little bit deeper on, or any other product that you might be interested in. Thank you very much.